The way we are looking at it is that we sort of want to be AWS for AI agents, like AWS 2.0, automated infrastructure.
Welcome to Partner Path, a podcast that unpacks the venture capital and growth equity ecosystem from a junior perspective. Young entrepreneurs and investors have already had a massive impact on the industry, having started unicorns and launched billion-dollar funds. We discuss these success stories and more by sharing perspectives and advice from some of the industry's most prominent role models. This podcast expresses our views as of the date published and does not represent the views of and is not endorsed by any company for which we work. Before we get to the episode, Laura and I are excited to announce a partnership with Overlap. Fresh out of Y Combinator's summer batch, Overlap is an AI-driven app that uses large language models to curate the best moments from podcast episodes. Imagine having a smart assistant who reads through every podcast transcript, finds the best parts or parts most relevant to your search, and strings them together to form a new, curated stream of content. That is what Overlap does. I personally use Overlap to explore content on future podcast guests and highly recommend it as another diligence tool for investors. Check out Overlap on the App Store today.
Today we are talking with Vasek, co-founder and CEO at e2b. Vasek, originally from the Czech Republic, came to SF in 2024 to build e2b, a platform for developers to run AI agents in the cloud securely. Welcome, Vasek.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me here. Hi, Laura.
Thanks for being here. Okay, let's go way back to the Czech Republic. I think you're actually our first guest from Czech. So I'd love to touch on what it's like growing up in Czech and how you even got into coding.
I'm not super surprised that I'm the first person on your podcast from the Czech Republic. Even in Silicon Valley, there's not that many people from the Czech Republic. And if there's a lot of engineers. I think we are a country with a lot of great engineers, very, very handsome people. So the growing up was, sometimes people think of Czech Republic as like Eastern European country. It's not that bad. We're pretty good. So I grew up with my co-founder in a small town with 30,000 people and close to borders with Slovakia and Austria. And we've known each other since, 6th grade. So it's like 15 years. We started, and the story is pretty cliche. So we started building video games. We were originally ditching school for going to my parents' house and coding there. I'm building video games that was iPhone at that time, I think, for iPhone.
And then did you stay for university in Czech with him?
When you want to go to university in the Czech Republic, you generally move to either capital, Prague, or one of the larger cities in the Czech Republic. So we moved to Prague. We both went to CS. He then changed the school to go to a different city. But every summer we got together at my apartment in Prague and we were building some kind of projects, essentially.
And how did you know that you wanted to go from a project to a company?
I don't know if there was a specific moment. So I grew up in a family where both my parents had small businesses. Actually, my dad, he has a vet clinic, animal clinic. And with my mom, they both worked there. So I think some kind of entrepreneurship was very natural to me. I remember there was a moment in high school, my parents and we visited Switzerland, and I saw this as an opportunity to start selling Swiss chocolate to my classmates, which worked great, by the way, until a teacher came to me and said you can't do this in school.
I feel like every great entrepreneur has a story where they were trying to sell something in school and the teacher was like, you actually can't do this.
Fortunately today, you have internet, so you can pretty much sell whatever you want and no one can stop you. But yeah, and I had all kinds of different ideas, building people's computers in my hometown based on what video games they wanted to play. And it was always there. I saw this as this creative process for me, more than I want to build a company. It was more okay, this is interesting challenge, or there's a problem. How do we solve this? And then I sort of learned about startups, I think, from Paul Graham's essay about original Y Combinator, Hacker News, all the typical story. And then I really like the idea of getting something out and seeing the reaction and feedback of people. And putting some like price on top of that is like even more exciting, that people are willing to give you their money for what you build. So it kind of came very naturally. I don't think there was like a single moment like we want to make a company. I think it was like, let's take this to the next step and next step and next step and next step.
Are there boundaries or things to consider when you're starting a company with your friend? Because you don't want to ruin the friendship, but you also want to do something that you love with someone who you trust.
I think our situation was a bit different because we've built so many things before that. We've never had like a discussion, okay, it's a company now and it's more serious. Like it's always been, we are building things together, but now we need to like, because I don't know, there are now people on the team, we need to make sure like we handle this. But it came very naturally. So we are still, of course, friends, but I think there's now advantage that we can be very direct and transparent with each other. And like if you know someone for 15 years, you know what to expect from that person. So it's very natural flow, like how it goes.
Probably communication styles as well. So I'm sure when you were dividing up roles and responsibilities as co-founders, it was probably a little bit easier in terms of knowing what you to handle as well as like knowing what he can take on.
Yeah, definitely. There are things that I think Thomas, my co-founder, is better at, and there are things where he thinks and I think I am better at. And to give you an example, like I'm the type of a person that is like, hurry, let's get this out.
Yeah.
And like make sure like we can move to the next step. And he's like the type of a person that is, okay, like let's stop for 30 seconds, 30 minutes, and maybe like think about what needs to be like done in a more like technical, thorough thing. So that's the reason he's a CTO, and I think I'm a CEO.
It's fair enough. And I wouldn't describe you all as the typical Silicon Valley AI agent team. What sparked the interest to move to the US to build versus building in Europe?
Generally, my view is that you should build where your users are. And this is sort of like a quick answer to this question. Like our users are developers building with AI apps, engineers. Mostly they are here. So it makes a lot of sense to build here. The longer answer is, I didn't think we would move, like fully move. I thought I would be visiting, every 2 months or something like that. And it would be more like marketing sales thing. Nowadays, I think like that would be the worst decision. Like when someone asks me or tells me, hey, like I'm a European founder, maybe from the Czech Republic, we have the team in the Czech Republic, but the founders, they go to SF, to Silicon Valley for like sales reasons. I'm like, that's the worst reason to go here, because like you have all this talent here, you have all these people building exciting things. Like your engineers should be like as well be here. So especially the early team, I think the early team, like it's important to have everyone on board. I didn't think we would do that, but we were originally like 2 co-founders, but then 4 people with first two people that joined E2b. And we started visiting together for like a month, 2 months. And that was in 2023. And it was like clear every time we visited SF, like things were moving much faster. Like if we wanted to, especially in the early days, if we wanted to help a user start using E2b, okay, we just met, we sat next to each other because the user was literally living in 2 blocks away or something.
Oh yeah, I mean the time change alone between Czech and SF.
Oh, yeah. I think like at certain stage it's doable. Like you can. It depends on how you structure your company, right? But like if you are 4 people, that's rough. That's hard, especially if you are figuring out like what's our go-to market. You don't have product market fit yet, and still a lot of changes daily, like really like every few hours maybe. So things are very dynamic. So that was the moment. Like it was very clear to me like we should be here. Like people have FOMO, but at certain point it's not FOMO. It's just MO.
Yeah, like this is what we have to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I like the description I got from one of the founders who told me that, look, like in Europe, in Prague, you will have 10 conversations. 9 of them will be average. 1 of them will be maybe like, oh, wow, I should do something, or I should change something. In SF or Silicon Valley, you will have this 10 conversations as well. And 5, 6 of them will be like, okay, that was like normal conversation, but the rest of them will be like, oh, oh, I don't know, can you curse here? Like, oh shit, like I should like really think about this. Like this will change things, right? Or maybe like you meet someone who has been doing something really on the edge, just possible that you haven't thought about. Like how many people you can talk about orchestrating micro VMs in Prague? Like not that many.
Probably can count on one hand.
Yeah.
It's also crazy. We were chatting before about the talent density and even just the dynamics within your office alone. There are two very impressive founders and like teams building where you can simply go up one floor, down one floor. And it's been very helpful for like, advice, like relationship building. I think both companies are a little bit more mature than you, which is just so crazy that it's just in your office alone.
And yeah, I think this just unfair advantage. Like if you can have someone very close by who's few steps ahead of you, that's a big win because like they can help you, not that they will do the work for you, but they can help you think about the structure of what you should be doing next, like, and ask the right question, make sure you don't fall in holes that you shouldn't be falling in.
That's fair. So, okay, we go from growing up in the Czech, coding, an entrepreneurial spirit, thinking about what to turn into a company as we're like building with our co-founder Tomas. Then we come to SF. We realize this is it. Maybe before we hop into E2b specifically, just touch on the state of AI agents and how you figured out this is the next big wave of innovation. This is what's missing in that wave. And now we need E2b.
When we started E2b, it's funny because I think our AI agents are going in the sinus waves or these waves because we started E2b in March 23. And there was a while where everyone was like an agent, like AutoGPT came out, like that's the thing. If like we will all make millions on the internet, like there was this task, like make $1 million in the internet or like make money on the internet, and you just let it go.
And then people are like, this doesn't work.
But you definitely saw like the sparks of like where this could go. So that was like everyone was interested in agents. Everyone soon realized, okay, like these things won't just do like every task for us. Things became more particularized, specialized. And so there was a moment like agents were still being talked about, but the hype was kind of going down. I think the rest of 23, early 24, or at least first half 24. And so the whole time we were like, oh, like, yeah, agents, that's what we are building for. And at some point we had this copy on our website, like code execution for AI agents or something like that. And it was the point I changed it like for AI apps. Because I thought like no one likes AI agents anymore.
It's all about branding.
Yeah, it's all about branding. And for us, like we saw that code execution is like a critical part of stack for an agent. Like you can use code to connect things, like what humans developers do, right? Like we connect things together, we make them work. That's part of what developers are building. You have all these API endpoints, all these services. Like why shouldn't an agent be able to do it as well? And code is kind of this lingua franca, like this glue that connects all these things together. So it felt very natural that you should have a code execution, secure code execution, and as agents are getting better, like the whole code environment, code runtime for the LLM. And a lot of things changed for us when we introduced specifically like code interpreting, like literally this two words, like code interpreting. We started explaining E2b in this way. And that I think it clicked with a lot of people that, hey, code execution is great if you want to do AI data analysis, visualizations, because all this is Python generated code that needs to run somewhere. If you want to have smarter LLM that can do math, like you can think of code as this very general calculator. If you want to have like, we have a user building this AI powered Excel sheet and you can describe what each column should do. And the way it works is the agent generates code based on the description ad hoc. So you can create like a data enrichment tool, data analysis tool, and it's all done through code execution.
How are people doing code execution before E2b?
Most of the time, and this is also how users come to us oftentimes, is just you start with something simple, like maybe you're just using a serverless function, or you have API endpoint on your server for running the code. Sometimes you are just running things locally when you are very early in the development, and it's fine. It's probably gonna work for you for the first several users, early days, but then you start running into more and more problems as you want to scale. Security, isolation, like you want to make sure that the same code doesn't run where the code from previous user ran, because you don't know what kind of code you're running, what kind of secrets might be leaking, and you want to give the AI agent or your AI app the most freedom you can in terms of what kind of code it wants to run. So you want to give it a full file system, ability to download packages as you are building more features into your app. And that brings all kinds of, technical security challenges to how to make sure you can have these environments quickly available. So that's how people transition from simple use cases like serverless functions to okay, we need something like E2b.
Now, a quick word from our sponsor. Laura and I are thrilled to announce a partnership with Grata, an intuitive deal sourcing and diligence platform. Keep missing out on private market deals? Ditch the Rolodex and get Grata. Grata's AI-powered platform provides accurate data, deep insights, and time-saving workflows that help get more deals done. And it's trusted by over 500 firms and 3,000 deal makers, including myself. I've personally used Grata in both my deal sourcing and diligence workflows and would recommend their tool to any investor across private equity, growth equity, corp dev, or investment banking. We've negotiated a special offer for our audience. Mention PartnerPath to the Grata team during sign-up, and you'll get free executive seats for your partners and MDs included in your subscription. Now, back to the episode.
Are there a specific type of agent or vertical that E2b is best served for today?
One of the biggest use cases for us is AI data analysis, and that essentially works if you remember in ChatGPT, there is this thing called data analyst, I think it's named, and you can upload a CSV file and start asking questions about it. The way it works is that the developer tells the LLM, okay, a user uploaded a CSV file, it has this kind of columns, and if you want to answer users' question about this data, you can run Python code. And you need to run that Python code somewhere. And so we created an environment. We have a dedicated SDK for this code interpreter. We created an environment that is optimized best for running this kind of code specifically. So if you can create charts, even interactive charts, you can install packages, bunch of data analysis packages are already pre-installed, and we make it really easy for the LLM to reference back to previous code blockers that it generated, before in a user session before. We make it really easy for the LLM for the developer to get an error from incorrectly generated code back to LLM so it can fix itself. So all these kind of things.
Basically, the outcome for developers is your agents can be more reliable.
More reliable, you can sleep well because there's isolation in place, and every agent has their own playground, essentially, their sandbox.
What languages are primarily used today?
Mostly Python and JavaScript. Yeah. So our second biggest use case nowadays that it really took off is people building their artifact, if you remember Anthropic's artifacts. So people are building their own these kind of types of apps, but for all kinds of different frameworks. So Svelte, Next.js, Vue.js, but also a Python, Streamlit, Gradio. And you need some kind of environment to run these apps, right? So you essentially need a runtime for AI-generated apps. And we have this open source template called Fragments, where the developers can fork, and it's a good starting point if they want to build something a type of app where you just type, hey, build me I'll give you a simple example, to-do app in Next.js. And the LLM generates the code, you send it to Sandbox, and you see the running.
You're probably very complementary to the other agent infrastructure components today, meaning the frameworks, observability, evaluation, routing. It's you can basically play nice with everyone. Or is there a world where you start to spread your wings wider and handle more of the agent stack?
The way we are looking at it is that we sort of want to be AWS for AI agents, AWS 2.0, automated infrastructure. Definitely not anytime soon. We are not going to things like agent prompting or memory. And my general view is that I'm a big believer that LLMs are getting better, and so a bunch of these problems will just get solved automatically. But for example, what's harder to solve is how to, for example, make sure that you always get an answer from LLM if the provider is, having an outage. Like how do you route to a different provider? So these are legit infrastructure questions we've had as developers for many, many years, but in different circumstances. And now we need to we need to support these things, like by we are, I mean developers in general, in the context of AI. And sometimes it requires a different type of approach.
Are there certain parts of the agent infrastructure stack today that you think LLMs are probably going to be posed to disrupt next? For example, memory.
Yeah, memory is a good example where I'm sort of undecided. I think LLMs are getting better at reducing hallucinations, even though it might take like longer time for them to think. I do think that, at least it feels to me, that like the whole prompt magician thing has gotten much lower in terms of like, I'm a bad prompter. And have been getting better results. So I'm doing tests on me. So like in the early days, like it was hard for me to get the right code I needed. I managed to do it, but nowadays I can just like very lazily describe what's my problem in Cursor, and it just works, and I get the code.
We've heard that about Cursor, it just works.
Yeah.
Seems to be the theme.
Yeah, and there's a ton of work in behind, right? But like in general, even if I go to just ChatGPT to Anthropic, even Perplexity, stuff like that. Like I have much higher hit rate essentially.
Related to the foundation models, like right now we're seeing very low switching costs. I mean, you can 1 or 2 lines, you're switching from Gemini to Claude, OpenAI. How do you think about enabling the developer experience and like raising switching costs for E2b?
Isn't it funny? Like in the early days, everyone was saying like, this is the biggest moat your LM provider, AI lab, like you can sleep well, and your GPT wrapper, like you're gonna have hard time, and here we are. So 100% agree with that it's easy, but like making sure that your app is still working or agent is hard. So that's where I think evals come in place, and those I think are still super important even more nowadays. I think people now understand like, okay, evals is what we really need to have. Your question was like, how do we make it? I think this is one of the hardest things building a dev tool, like figuring out the right DX. And you kind of need to find that line where, for example, one of our values when customers come to us, especially from bigger companies, they really like they don't need to be locked in with a certain LLM. Because, OpenAI has their code interpreter thing, but they don't want to use it. And one of the reasons is, for example, that they can't control it and they would need to stay logged in with OpenAI, and they don't have an option to go to Google as well or an open source LLM because the code interpreter just doesn't work because OpenAI doesn't have the incentive to make it work with anyone. So, for example, this is the case where we need to make it easy for developers to switch. But I think where you can win the developers is like if you make the DX, you don't even almost need to think about using the tool, like it's like extension of your brain. So it almost seems like this would be easy to change because you are not thinking about it actively, but that actually means no, you don't even want to think about changing it because you love it so much that you are just like in the flow with the tool. And that's like all kinds of small things, like you don't want to overwhelm the developer with needing to understand how your infrastructure works, don't need to have all kinds of config files, like all these things kind of lock you in a certain way, but I think it's in the wrong incentive lock you in, like that's not a good DX.
Would you be complimentary to people building agents like with different multimodal capabilities, or is it primarily text today?
It's getting into more multimodal, so we have users that are using code execution and they are not even building like a developer-centric agent. Like, for example, that example I explained earlier about our user building this AI-powered Excel sheet, spreadsheet. Yeah. That's sort of not really like developer-centric thing. The user of that product would be maybe an executive, like CEO, business person in general, or anyone who needs like get some data essentially. But under the hood, it's using code execution, and I think this is where we are seeing more and more of this. It's still early for this, but it's very exciting direction where people are realizing you can use code to other than developer things.
I also think pricing is an interesting problem for agents right now because one could argue SaaS-based pricing per seat might not be the best option for agents. But to your point, you have people running for a few seconds or running for hours and hours. So you also have to be careful with consumption-based pricing because you don't want to rack up someone's bill.
Yeah.
And then they're dissuaded to continue to use E2b. I don't know if there's an answer, but I'm sure it's something your team's thinking through.
Oh yeah, we just had a very long discussion about this yesterday. I think pricing for infrastructure companies is actually really, really hard. And I think there's this recurring theme that a founder starts an infrastructure company and says, okay, so we will make this pricing super easy. I hate this AWS stuff, GCP stuff, cloud provider pricing. You will just pay us $100 per month. Plus, like, there's like very simple table with 2 rows, how like we charge you on top of that if you go over some limits. And then like 6 months go by, you start scaling it of usage and you're realizing, okay, like I need to bill my users for like this traffic. I need to bill my users for the storage. I need to, for all this smaller, like, all kinds of stuff. And then you you end up with like AWS kind of table for pricing. So it's very important how you communicate this to users. It's important that you have, there are some table stakes, features that you should have, like billing limits, cost alerts, to make sure that the user has all the control, feels like they have all the control. And observability into what is happening is very important. So I can see it on myself. If we have large spend somewhere, I'm fine with it if we got more volume. But I need to understand why we have such spend, because I need to connect, like, okay, so is the spend because a lot of users were doing X or something, you know?
There's 3 use cases where agents are most commonly talked about right now is like working, and the definition of working, it can be argued, but I think coding, which we've touched on with Cursor, great tool for devs. Sales, we're seeing go-to-market efforts being automated and relieving a lot of those manual efforts that sales reps were doing. And then customer support. You see companies like Sierra and Decagon being implemented in Fortune 100 companies, adding real value and resolving incidents quicker. I'm curious, you take these 3, where do you see as the next waves of innovations where agents will hopefully be working? And this could also be use cases where people will use E2b to build.
One comes to my mind immediately, and that has been, at least on all over the Twitter or X, computer use or browser use, which is very, very close to each other. Agents basically controlling your computer. So that's still very experimental. Anthropic was one of the first ones to release something more public. I think it was last year. OpenAI launched their operator a few days ago, actually, or a week ago. And that's, I think, opens all kinds of possibilities and challenges. So, like, probably you don't want the agent to use your computer willy-nilly, right? Like, you want to have some control over it. You want to have some opt-in. So people are building these cloud computers for agents. We actually have like desktop sandbox SDK, and we build like open computer use repository with open source LLMs where we tried to sort of like mimic, like, it was a kind of like challenge for us. Can we build open source computer use just from open LLMs? And yeah, we have this desktop sandbox that you can launch, and it's essentially a cloud computer with graphics and all of this. I think it's 2025 will be very interesting year for this. I think this can be like high, essentially one kind of these things like high return with potential high return, but like it's so many unclear things. I'm not completely sure, for example, if in 5 years it would look like that agents are using cloud computers, like maybe there's a better way to do that. But it's extremely interesting to see like something just working in the background, and especially if you could create something like a digital twin of your local machine, that would be a huge thing for businesses and for any like non-developer work.
I do wonder how something like operator scales, because if you use it today for consumer use cases, which they're promoting food ordering, like booking a flight, it's like you could probably argue that I could go on United Airlines with my information is already saved. Basically, I already know my preferences because I fly it so much, where the time saved is probably not much, maybe like 30 seconds max. So I do wonder how that scales, and will we get to a point where you almost prompt it and then it can just act completely autonomously, because that saves time when you're not doing the clicking. So I guess time will tell. Yeah,
I mean, definitely I agree that the goal isn't to watch the agent do the work for you, and it's like just being frustrated by the fact that it's taking much longer than it would take you. I think there's a legit argument that the mental burden on you is much lower because you just don't need to think about it, that you need to do this task. Like in the perfect world, there is a to-do app. I type something like as a new to-do and it just starts being worked on. by some agent. I think that's where everyone wants to go with this. There's also this question of like, it's gonna be weird because like all these websites, airlines, booking, hotel websites, they are optimized for people to click on stuff, right? They spend millions on that. And so now there are agents coming there.
Ad providers aren't going to love that.
Yeah. And so the websites won't love that as well because like they spend a lot of money and people on that. So what is going to happen? Like the incentives are not aligned.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any industries you think are potentially posed for disruption? We've seen AI have a massive impact on legal, for example, but I think there's other areas where we haven't quite seen it yet. Maybe you could argue like politics.
I mean, there are obvious ones like art, movies, writing. Those are already clear that something is happening there.
I think multimodal capabilities too will be massive implications this year, just because we're seeing tailwinds from video, audio, and voice models.
Oh yeah, video games are going to get interesting, right? So there's this whole like potential concept of LLMs where you can just do things on the fly. Like you don't even need a computer. Everything is being generated.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Very early. I'm trying to think if there's something like non-obvious that would come to my mind.
I think there'll be better creative use cases for PowerPoint, for example, design creation, because Canva's done a nice job of implementing AI features and I think speeding up your workflow, but it's still not really agentic yet. So I think we'll start to see more in the design space. And I mean, I would love to be able to prompt PowerPoint to put what's in my head or what I need to put on a slide quickly, because it's still a lot of manual dragging, dropping. I think even Tome was doing AI PowerPoints and they pivoted now to AI sales.
I think every like consultancy type of job where you are like presenting something to people, like it's going to be getting targeted.
Disrupted, yeah. What have you seen as you started to work with mid-sized to larger customers in terms of this whole build versus buy debate? Do you think in the long term we'll still have enterprise companies using these off-the-shelf frameworks? You could think of a lane graph or a crew, OpenAI has swarms, or do you think we'll start to see people just needing the extensibility and customization to their specific environment that they're like, we have to build it ourselves?
So first, I think things are changing more now because when a lot of these frameworks started originally, they started in very early days of LLMs. And things were, like, core concepts were changing. Things are still changing now, like, LLMs are getting better, more capable, but everyone now knows, for example, that there are efficient techniques for some kind of prompting. People know that there's a chain of thought, things react. Those, like, approaches are now more stable, and we figure out, like, LLMs should be using tools. So if there's a framework, because frameworks are built on top of these assumptions, right? And like for a developer, it's hard to build with a framework if the framework is changing under your hands. Like it's frustrating.
Yeah.
If you have like 10 different ways to do the thing, like just give me the one. That's why I'm using the framework. I want a sort of like opinionated way to do it because I like that framework. I like how they are doing things. So that I think will be coming. And it's already like with companies like Crew AI, I think line graph also like this more opinionated, is becoming more true, and developers will be accepting these frameworks more. With frameworks, I think it's like never-ending battle. Like there'll always be another one. That has been true in general development since 1980s.
The agent framework competition is like the model transformer competition. It's
yeah.
like Anthropic, OpenAI, and now it's turning into Crew, lane graph.
So you need to find your way to, like you don't probably capture the money on the framework itself. Like there's usually like the infrastructure play, things like that.
Yeah, I think we're seeing folks in the framework expand their offerings.
Yeah.
Actually, LangChain's a good example because LangChain now has LangGraph and LangSmith. So you can pitch yourselves as like a total agent package. Not total, but
core
components.
Yeah, my general view is that you should start without framework. And like if you don't know yet what you like exactly like how you want to build things, and there are like frameworks that are sort of in this like differently positioned, that it's not really like an agent framework, but like as you would describe LangChain, but it's more like making it easy to work with the LLM, like AI SDK from Vercel. Mm-hmm. So that's very interesting, I think.
Yeah.
That's I think where the direction like is going this year.
Yeah. I agree. We're very long on Vercel. Cool. Do you want to end with a quick fire round?
Yeah, let's do it.
What's your favorite agent company that's not E2B?
I like Julius, if you heard.
Oh,
Julius
yes.
AI.
Okay.
Those are very exciting.
Is an enterprise company that you think is poised to disrupt the agent space successfully?
For the longest time, I thought that would be GitHub, but
Yeah.
I don't think that happened much. I still don't understand what Slack is doing, because they have all my work information,
Yeah.
and I just would love to have some.
They have a lot of unstructured data.
Yeah.
If you were given $100 million today, would you invest in Anthropic at $70 billion or OpenAI at $150 billion?
I want to say Anthropic, but I need to say OpenAI. So I like Anthropic LLMs more as a developer, especially the Claude Sonnet 3.5. But I just think Sam from OpenAI is such a strong operator that I would go with that.
What's one word to describe the future of E2B? You could use two.
New AWS.
Love it. Thank you, Vasek.
Thank you.